Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host, Bryan. We're going to continue on with this week's theme, exploring covers, looking at a band playing an original song and then checking out another band putting their own spin on it. The more diverse and the more things altered, the better, I think, for this week in particular. We're going to be checking out something from an original side today, and we'll look at the cover tomorrow. This time we're going to be looking at some Talking Heads. The track in question is Heaven, off of their 1979 album, Fear of Music. Let's dive in and see what Talking Heads is bringing to the table today. Really hung on to that tension for a bit longer than I expected. There's a lot of dynamic quality to the vocals. Just looking at volume-wise, there's a big shift in volume dynamics between specific syllables. It's interesting, too, to find that so much of this song is very similar from moment to moment. Atmospherically, I'm going to say there is nuance from verse to chorus. Reduction of layers, additional notes on the bass. But the feeling of both is very similar. The dreary, I don't know what instrument that is. It's not coming back either. There's a nice texture off on the side of this. What even was this song? All right, Talking Heads. I think this is going to be a rather short analysis because a lot of it is just the same thing. Now, we will get into some nuance. I don't want anyone to walk away from this thinking that I view every moment of this as just a monolithic form of artistic expression. But pretty much every part of this song resonates with me identically. There is a bluesy element to this. There are some melancholic chords and a general dreariness to a lot of it. And, even there at the end, I picked up a note that just did a lot of bending and slurring of tones, just very bluesy resonance from a sonic perspective there. But alongside this is beautiful progressions as well. There's uplifting, joyful components to this track. There's also more ambiguous, neutral chordal and melodic movement in here as well that I don't have as strong of a read on. At best, I see it as a middle point that the more sorrowful elements and the more positive elements are contrasted between. Not necessarily leaning one way or the other, but simply sitting in somewhere in the middle, less of an emotional resonance and more of a neutrality of emotion. Then I think about the vocals and the really strong delivery of them. I think about how some of these notes just have so much power and strength behind them, very defined. And I don't know, I guess the word would be confident in what's being said. But it's usually also paired with something that's a bit quieter, more breathy, and less supported. Some of this may just be the general fluidity of the phrasing, coming in soft, hitting a high point, and then ending soft again. Good old bell curve of delivery. But I wonder if there isn't something a bit more thematic to it, since harmonically and melodically we are exploring negative and positive, two sides of the same coin here. From that perspective, it makes sense that the sonic delivery would line up with some of these ideas as well. There is a general chord progression that sits underneath all of this. What I think is most interesting is that this just kind of gives us a baseline foundation. It doesn't really lean one way or the other emotionally. It's the melodic parts. It's the ornamental ideas that pop in once and then leave, not to come back again until maybe the next time through that section. It's the melodies. It's all of the notes that sit around and are contrasted against this core chordal foundation. I kind of wish I could hear just the chord progression. Maybe just a stem of the chords with probably the bass line to go along with it, just so I could get a strong sense of what's going on there emotionally, atmospherically, because I'm not 100% confident in its neutrality, but I do find that it is consistent where my emotional resonance is not. Whether I'm feeling that it's a bit more sorrowful or a bit more positive and joyful typically depends on the things that happen around it. It may just be a simple recontextualization though, and the chord progression itself does lean one way or another. But again, it's tough for me to say when there's so many moving parts in this song that it's difficult for me to isolate what it's bringing specifically to the emotional side of things. But I do think that generally my experience with this kind of moves between, in the neutral sections, boredom, maybe. I'm not going to say that I'm bored during the song, but I just have nothing to engage with at this moment. It is akin to being bored, waiting for that next moment of engagement, waiting for that next moment of excitement, waiting for that thing to happen. And As far as the chords are concerned, the next thing is the strong emotional component, waiting for a melody or an instrument to come in and define the moment where it wasn't a second ago. And so I think in a way I could kind of define this as boredom, sorrow, and joy, and the three of them mixing together, creating something a bit interesting. I don't know how to read it because the three of those are vastly different. One is a lack of things, and the other two are things but the polar opposites. And the song bounces between them with ease. It creates something that is different moment to moment. There is also the embellishing ideas, though. We have the bass guitar, which sounds great in here. We have some chords on a guitar. I think we have some sort of piano or keyboard element in there as well. We have the vocals, very light drumming, and the guitar. And then we also have like maybe their synth. This is 1979. I'm trying to think of like what technology was around. I'm just going to use synth in general, and you can replace that with electric organ or Moog or whatever instrument it may be more specifically. But we have these hazy textures that sit behind everything, and they kind of give us this drone. Sometimes I feel like it's a part of the chord progression, sometimes it just is. And I never really picked up a pattern on when we shifted from just holding out a texture into where we moved along with the song. But it sits in the background. It's really hazy. It's quiet. It just sort of creates this texture on the outskirts of the track. I think the song needs it. Without it, it feels a little empty, but it's also done in a way it blends into the background. You don't really notice it's there most of the time, and it's quite possible that you may have heard this hundreds of times, and this is the first time you've ever heard it. Me just bringing it up, you go back and you're like, oh yeah, dude, there is a little, synth back there or something, some sort of tone just being held out. I think it easily blends into the song. I don't want to say that it's forgettable, but it does its job at filling space. And that is a very important role. It's an invisible role in a lot of music, but incredibly important. This could have felt rather empty, and instead it feels large and full, even in the verses, which tend to have less layers than the chorus. And then there's just the stuff that sits on the left and the right, just kind of coming in one at a time, just doing their thing, and then leaving. They add so much texture and character to the song. I can't talk about every single one of them individually, but they do contribute in ways to allow the song to feel more than what it is. It feels denser, it feels more complex, it feels wider even. There's a lot of instrumentation when you take all of the different timbres together, and it creates something that feels a bit more diverse than I think this song would have been in another band's hands. Even if they had played the exact same parts, I don't think we would have heard as many sounds or distinct tones or timbres on this track, and it really adds to a certain variety, which I think the song needs, because the harmonic element is rather static. It does shift between those three modes, but like I said, generally speaking, every section feels very similar. It is just a collection of these three different emotions. Melodically, we hear all the melodies within the first minute and a half or so. We don't get too much variety on that. And atmospherically, well, the emotions, the chords, most of the core instruments, their timbres don't change. And so it can get very repetitive. And these ornamental ideas keep things fresh on a purely sonic level from moment to moment. The song went by quicker than I expected, but it also felt like 4 minutes. It didn't go by quickly, but it didn't feel like it dragged either. I think a lot of that comes down to the fact that aside from listening to these interesting things on the outskirts, there really isn't anything that changes in the middle. So you kind of get the majority of the song within the opening quarter of it, and then you just continue to exist within this idea. Maybe that's cool, maybe it's not. I don't know if I would enjoy this a second time through. Maybe there'll be some details I pick up, but I certainly don't see this song having a lot of staying power with me in particular. You might be able to listen to this hundreds of times and love it. I think I would definitely grow a bit bored of this after maybe 3 or 4. Once I've begun to really understand all of the nuance and it's just the feeling that's left. And the feeling just doesn't change. This is a static atmosphere of this art. So I tend to like more dynamic elements in my music. Speaking of dynamic elements, good segue there, brain. Dynamic performance for the vocalist. A lot of the other instruments are rather straightforward. Not a lot of nuance to how the notes are delivered, but the vocals are consistently moving. I found this to be rather interesting. Like I said earlier, it could just be that this is how the vocals are done. After all, it's a nice bell curve. You come in soft, hit your peak as far as volume and physicality and support are concerned, and then you taper it off. But when I'm listening to the vocals, I get something more emotional out of them. I feel like they're trying to tell me something that lines up with what the music is doing. It almost sounds like a lack of certainty at points, and then maybe a false bolsterousness to make the song feel more supported for a moment. And if you watch the volume stuff over here, you may have noticed that we hit some wild peaks. Only 3, I think, in the entire song where we hit full volume. Everything else is a little under it. It's a track that only a couple of times feels like it is completely sure of everything, fills out the sound spheres, totally supported, and has that weight to it. Everything else is just a little more timid. The vocals lead the way at these 3 peaks. It's what makes me think everything else is purposeful too. If this song bounces back and forth between neutrality or a type of waiting, joy and sorrow, it doesn't quite know what it is. It is opposing ideas and also waiting for something that will trigger those opposing emotions. It feels conflicted, though I think overall it does carry everything together into a rather defined emotional set that is the sum of all of these together. But I wonder if the vocals aren't done this way in order to imply this conflict of not really knowing where you stand. Sometimes being on the fence, sometimes teetering to one way or the other, and only occasionally ever finding that conviction to say, this is how I feel. When I look at the lyrics, I will probably have the music up once more just to hear what words are being said with this power, so that I can kind of see if my hypothesis here might have any sort of support to it in the lyrics. Maybe there is something special or specific about those words that knowing that they have more support to them changes the meaning of them, or maybe changes the meaning of the words around them, as I now know that they are less supported in the performance. That's really all I have to talk about on this one. Dynamic vocals, emotional flexibility, and a lot of repetition with minor alterations around it. So let's dive into some lyrics on this and see what we can figure out from that. I'm going to try to say this as delicately as I can, as to not evoke the ire of Talking Heads fans. I think it's interesting that I brought up the idea of waiting, of boredom in the song. Because the lyrics are kind of boring. And what they talk about is kind of boring, but it's a very subjective type of boring, because the thing is that the song talks about what it does with positivity in mind. It is looking forward to the static elements of heaven. That's what the song is about. They are conceptualizing what heaven could be, and in their mind, it would be the same thing every day with zero change. Now, you may have noticed, continuing on with zero change, different but identical, is kind of what the music was when I described it as well. The verses and the choruses being very identical with minor alterations to them, to the point that the whole song feels the same to me. Each verse and chorus is not too dissimilar from the verse and chorus that came before it or after it. To them, as they state in the second verse, it's hard to imagine that nothing at all could be so exciting, could be so fun. To me, the repetition of every day being the same doesn't sound fun or exciting at all. It sounds comfortable, maybe, but not fun, not exciting. And this song, I will say, feels comfortable, but not really fun or exciting. But when I say that the lyrics themselves are boring, let me just read you, line for line, the opening stanza. Everyone is trying to get to the bar. The name of the bar is called heaven. Three of those lines could have been condensed down into one. There is a lot of repetition of idea there. Unnecessary repetition of ideas. It doesn't really hammer home anything. It doesn't turn something into a mantra or really give any particular words weight. It just takes up space. To get to the bar, the name of the bar is called heaven. Two of those lines are pretty much the same thing. They set up the same information, except only one of them actually delivers on it. I'm just not a big fan of this opening verse, and that really sets the tone for the stanzas that come after it. The chorus is just heaven. Heaven is a place where nothing ever happens. Again, more repetition being used. We are taking up space by repeating words that wouldn't be there if we were just saying the sentence outright. It does help create rhythmic flow. Maybe it does add elements for the melody to expand. But as far as words are concerned, there's a lot of nothing being said here. The second verse talks about a party. Everyone's there and everyone leaves at the same time. The third verse talks about a kiss. As soon as it's over, it starts again. Not any different from the last time. Won't be any different from the next time. You just keep kissing. It's the same thing over and over and over. That's the whole song. Now, what I find interesting about this is that I can find the neutrality and the joy in the lyrics. I don't really see anything sorrowful in here, at least not from the perspective of the lyrics, which paints all of this as a positive thing, that the nothing that happens is interesting, it's exciting, it's fun. But to me, I do find a sorrow in this. This feels like hell to me, not heaven. And I can definitely find that if I were in this case of there just being a bar where you go get a drink, listen to the same songs, have that same drink, dance with the same people, kiss the same person or people. I don't know, it could be a kind of a funner heaven maybe in that regard. And then leave all at the same time to do the exact same thing over tomorrow for eternity. That is not a heaven to me at all. So I would find immense sorrow out of this. But as I said, that's a subjective sorrow. I don't see where the bluesier, drearier elements of the music match the lyrics as they are stated from their perspective. So I'm kind of curious if anyone has any perspective into that. But I think for the most part, everything else I talked about in the music is clearly portrayed here in the lyrics as well. Simplicity, a comfort, a joy, and a repetition. Every day being the same, every verse chorus combo being the same. 2 would have been a coincidence, but to do 3 verses and 3 choruses, all mostly identical, and then wrap the song up, that becomes intentional. And I think that's the main reason there is a 3rd verse on here, because honestly, I don't think the words don't justify 2 of the verses, much less having 3 of them. They're all sort of still painting the same idea in a little bit of different way. But I do think that having 3 verses and choruses musically is necessary to drive this idea of repetition, of everything always being the same. And so that's a really smart idea to go about creating the music then. These are my thoughts. Drop the pen. These are my thoughts on Talking Heads' Heaven. What did you think of it? Is there anything that stood out to you? Anything you'd like to add on to what I said or correct me on? Maybe you have your own thoughts, opinions, or perspective about it. Please put all of that into the comments section. Above that, in the description box, you'll find a link to Linktree. Takes you here. You can find links to my music, ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord server, and so much more. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all 3 of those. That wraps it up for today. I'll be back tomorrow, though, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 9 p.m. UTC as usual. We're going to continue on with Tropical Fuckstorm's take on Heaven. I think we've heard them once before, but honestly, I can't place a sound on them. So I'm interested to see what they do with this track that's hopefully will be a bit different than how Talking Heads envisioned it. Until next time then, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.